The air was heavy with the scent of roasted chicken and the sweet aroma of apple pie as I entered the living room, where the family dinner was about to unfold. The table was adorned with a vibrant checkered tablecloth, and the dim light from the overhead chandelier cast a warm, inviting glow. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect setting, tension simmered like a pot on the verge of boiling over. I could feel my heart race as I took my seat, glancing at my mother, Margaret, who was busy arranging the last few dishes. Her meticulous nature was both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of her unyielding expectations. As the evening progressed, laughter echoed around the table, but it felt forced, like a performance we were all obligated to partake in. My mother's sharp wit often cut through the laughter, leaving a trail of awkward silences in its wake. I remembered last year's dinner when she had laughed at my career choices, her words laced with condescension. You know, Hannah, maybe if you focused more on reality, you wouldn't be struggling so much. The memory lingered, a reminder of how easily my self-worth crumbled under her scrutiny. Tonight, I hoped for a different outcome, but as the conversation turned to gifts, my pulse quickened. I had received a package that day, something from my mother that felt like a weight I had to carry. As I unwrapped it, the bright wrapping paper crinkled under my fingers, revealing a beautiful but impractical necklace, a symbol of her expectations rather than my desires. I thought you'd love this, dear. It's very you, she proclaimed, her smile stretching wide, yet her eyes betrayed a hint of disappointment when my expression faltered. The laughter that followed was tinged with an awkwardness I couldn't ignore. I forced a smile, but I felt the walls closing in around me, my throat tightening as if I were about to choke on my own voice. My partner, Alex, shot me a concerned glance, his brow furrowed. I could sense his frustration with the situation, and it only added to my internal conflict. I wanted to scream, to express how I felt devalued and unseen, but the fear of confrontation held me back, wrapping around me like a vice. The evening reached a breaking point when someone made a joke at my expense, and laughter erupted around the table. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and humiliation flooding over me. I managed a weak chuckle, but deep down I was seething. The weight of my mother's expectations loomed larger than ever, and I knew that this night would linger in my mind long after the dishes were cleared. It was a reminder that my worth was still up for debate, and I was tired of feeling like a punchline in my own life. The tension was palpable, and I could sense it building, ready to spill over into a private breakdown that I couldn't yet foresee. I sat on the edge of my bed, the cool sheets crumpled beneath me, reflecting the chaos swirling in my mind. The walls were painted a muted blue, a color that once brought me comfort but now felt suffocating. My family photos hung crookedly, reminders of happier times, yet they only deepened my sense of isolation. Each frame seemed to mock me with the laughter captured within, laughter I was never a part of. I could still hear my mother's voice echoing in my head, her words sharp and critical, cutting through my resolve like a knife. With a deep breath, I tried to steady my racing heart, but the weight of my emotions was heavy. I had spent years trying to fit into my mother's mold, to meet her expectations, but it felt like I was losing myself in the process. The thought of confronting her filled me with dread, yet I knew it was necessary. I needed to reclaim my identity, to tell her that I was more than the disappointment she often made me feel. My fingers trembled as I picked up a framed photo of us from the nightstand. In it, I was smiling, but the memory felt tainted by the harsh reality of our relationship. The kitchen was bustling as I made my way downstairs, the smell of coffee wafting through the air, mingling with the faint scent of burnt toast. My mother stood by the stove, her back turned to me, seemingly lost in her own world. I hesitated, the words I had rehearsed in my mind slipping away like sand through my fingers. "Hannah, you're up late again," she remarked without turning around, her tone dismissive, as if my presence was merely an afterthought. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I wanted to scream that I was more than her expectations, more than her failures. Instead, I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "I just needed some time to think," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Her silence was deafening, a clear indication that my thoughts were unimportant to her. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, memories flooded back, moments of being overshadowed by my siblings, of feeling invisible in my own family. I realized I could no longer avoid the confrontation that loomed ahead. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. I had to speak up, to break the cycle of silence that had defined our relationship for too long. This was my moment to challenge her control, to assert my identity, and I could feel the resolve building within me, despite the fear that clung to my every thought. Just then, Margaret entered the room, her presence commanding. "What's wrong with you today? You look like you've seen a ghost," she snapped, eyes narrowing. It was the perfect opening, but my voice faltered. I stared into my coffee, the swirling liquid mirroring the chaos in my mind. This was it. I had to confront her, to articulate the pain I had endured in silence for too long. My heart pounded as I took a deep breath, ready to finally speak my truth. The living room was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the walls as I sat at the edge of the couch, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. My family had gathered again, their chatter filling the space with an air of casual normalcy that felt foreign to me. I could smell the faint aroma of burnt popcorn lingering from an earlier snack, a reminder of the tension that had recently bubbled over between us. I glanced around, noticing the familiar faces of my siblings, their laughter echoing in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. They were oblivious, caught up in their own stories, while I felt like an outsider looking in on a world I once belonged to. I shifted in my seat, the fabric of the couch scratching against my jeans, a physical manifestation of my unease. My mother entered, her presence commanding the room. She wore a bright smile, yet I could see the faintest flicker of apprehension in her eyes as they scanned the group. I clenched my fists, determined to speak up about the injustice I felt, but the words lodged in my throat, heavy and unyielding. "Can we talk?" I finally blurted out, my voice trembling slightly. A hush fell over the room, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. My sister's eyes widened, and my brother exchanged a quick glance with my mother. "Now?" my mother asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "Yes, now. This can't wait any longer," I insisted, feeling a mix of fear and urgency surge through me. My siblings shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a mixture of concern and confusion. I felt the weight of their gaze, each pair of eyes probing and questioning, as if they were waiting for the truth to unravel. "What's this about?" my mother asked, her voice a blend of annoyance and curiosity. I could sense the walls she had built around herself, a fortress against my words. "I wanted to talk about how I feel excluded, how your expectations have pushed me away," I said, my heart racing. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. My mother's face tightened, her expression hardening as she processed my words. "You think I push you away?" she finally replied, her voice rising slightly. "You have to meet me halfway, Hannah." "It's not all on me." The conversation spiraled, each word exchanged a step further from peace. I could see the disappointment in my siblings' eyes, a reflection of my own inner turmoil. I felt anger welling up, mixing with the sadness that had become my constant companion. This wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, it was a failed peace. I turned away, fighting back the urge to cry. I needed to find a way to address this injustice, to reclaim my voice, but for now, all I could do was wrestle with my emotions in the confines of my heart. The cafe buzzed with the low hum of conversation, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sweet aroma of pastries, a comforting contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I sat at a corner table, my fingers tracing the rim of my cup, feeling the warmth seep into my skin as I recalled the events of the family dinner. Every laugh shared around the table echoed in my mind, each one a reminder of the void I felt in my own family's narrative. My heart raced as I thought about the confrontation that was long overdue. As I sipped my coffee, I could feel the anxiety tightening in my chest like a vice. I remembered the moment I had finally decided to voice my feelings, how the words had hovered on the tip of my tongue, a fragile whisper amidst the noise of my mother's dismissive laughter. "You're being dramatic, Hannah," I could almost hear her say, the tone cutting deeper than any knife. I had become accustomed to the sting of her words, but this time I was determined to be heard. If only I could muster the courage to confront her directly. Just then, my phone buzzed, dragging me back to the present. It was a message from Sophie, her words a comforting balm. "You've got this, Hannah. Don't let her silence you again." I felt a flicker of defiance spark within me, igniting the resolve I needed to reclaim my voice. I had spent years tiptoeing around my mother's opinions, allowing her to dictate my worth. But no more. I envisioned myself standing firm, meeting her gaze with unwavering strength. With each sip of my coffee, I imagined the confrontation vividly, the scene playing out like a film in my mind. I would sit across from her at the dining table, the tension palpable, and I would say, "Mom, I won't let you diminish my feelings anymore. I deserve to be seen and heard." My pulse quickened at the thought, the adrenaline coursing through me as I envisioned her reaction, surprise, then perhaps anger, but I would not back down. The cafe began to empty as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow through the windows. I felt a sense of urgency rising within me, pushing me to take action. I needed to confront her before my courage faded. I could not allow fear to hold me captive any longer. As I gathered my things to leave, a renewed determination washed over me. The final trigger would soon unfold, and I was ready to face whatever came next, prepared to assemble my plan for the confrontation that would change everything. The tension hung thick in the air as I paced around my apartment, the dim light casting long shadows that danced along the walls. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the space, mingling with the faint hint of lavender from the diffuser, but it did little to soothe my anxious mind. I was waiting for Sophie to arrive, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. Today was supposed to be the day we devised a plan to confront my family, to bridge the chasm that had grown wider with every unspoken word. As I waited, my thoughts spiraled. What if our efforts to mend the relationship only led to more chaos? I recalled the painful moments of the previous family gathering, the laughter that echoed around me while I felt like a ghost. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up my phone, scrolling through our messages from last night. Sophie's words rang clear in my mind. "We can't let this continue, Hannah. You deserve to be heard." I wanted to believe that, but fear gnawed at me, a fear that confronting my family would shatter any semblance of peace we had left. When Sophie knocked on the door, it startled me from my reverie. I opened it to find her standing there, a blend of determination and compassion in her eyes. "Let's get to it, shall we?" she said, her voice steady and reassuring. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat as we settled onto the couch, a makeshift war room for our mission. The atmosphere shifted to one of shared resolve as we began to brainstorm. "We need a plan that feels right for you, one that speaks your truth without igniting a firestorm," Sophie encouraged, her hands gesturing animatedly. As we mapped out our approach, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. We discussed possible scenarios, rehearsed what I might say, and how to express my feelings without triggering my mother's defensive walls. But as we continued, doubts crept in. What if my words fell flat? What if my mother dismissed my feelings yet again? I could feel the weight of those questions pressing down on my shoulders as I stared at the notes we had scribbled. "You know," Sophie said softly, interrupting my spiral of thoughts, "no matter how this goes, you're doing something brave. Just remember, it's about your voice, not their reaction." Her words resonated deeply, and for a moment I felt the fear dissipate, replaced by a newfound determination. However, as the meeting drew closer, the reality of what lay ahead loomed larger than ever. I had to confront my family, not just for my sake, but for the possibility of healing our fractured connections. As we wrapped up our planning session, I felt a cocktail of hope and anxiety swirling within me. I knew the path to reconciliation would be fraught with challenges, but I was no longer willing to remain silent. I had a plan, and with Sophie by my side, I felt emboldened to take that crucial step forward. The assembly of our thoughts was just the beginning. The real test awaited us in the showdown that was to come, and I had to be ready to face whatever my family would throw my way, determined to reclaim my place and my voice. The air hung thick with tension as I stood in the living room, the familiar surroundings now feeling foreign and stifling. Dim light filtered through the curtains, casting shadows that danced on the walls, mirroring the turmoil brewing inside me. My heart raced in my chest, each beat echoing the weight of the confrontation I had been dreading. I could hear my family's laughter from the kitchen, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling within me. As I gripped the edge of the couch, the fabric rough against my skin, memories of past arguments flashed through my mind like a slideshow of pain and frustration. "Hannah, can you come here for a moment?" my mother called, her voice slicing through the laughter like a knife. I hesitated, every fiber of my being screaming to retreat, but I knew I couldn't hide any longer. The truth needed to be spoken, even if it meant facing her wrath. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come, and stepped toward the kitchen where the warmth of the gathering enveloped me like a heavy blanket. As I entered, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to me, their expressions a mix of surprise and apprehension. My mother stood at the center, her arms crossed, a familiar posture that spoke volumes of her expectations. "What's wrong? You look upset," she said, feigning concern, but I could sense the underlying challenge in her tone. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago was now replaced by a palpable tension, and I felt my throat tighten as I prepared to unleash the words I had rehearsed countless times in my mind. "I need to talk to you about the slideshow, about how I felt invisible during the family gathering," I began, my voice wavering but resolute. The room felt even smaller as I spoke, each word a step forward into the unknown. My mother's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing slightly as if bracing for impact. "You're being dramatic, Hannah. It was just a fun moment," she replied dismissively, her tone dripping with condescension. My heart sank, but I pressed on, fueled by the years of pent-up frustration. It wasn't just a fun moment for me. It hurt to see everyone's joy while I felt like a ghost in my own family. "I deserve to be seen and acknowledged just like everyone else," I exclaimed, my voice rising with emotion. The words hung in the air, a raw declaration that shattered the silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of my truth finally breaking free. In that moment, I watched as my mother's facade cracked, her eyes betraying a flicker of surprise. The room felt charged, the atmosphere electric with tension, and I knew this was the turning point I had been waiting for. I had finally summoned the courage to express my pain, to confront the denial that had long overshadowed our family dynamics. As I stood there, vulnerability etched across my face, I could feel the tide shifting, a reckoning unfolding before us, and I wasn't going to back down now. The air in my bedroom felt charged with anticipation, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows that danced on the walls. I sat cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by scattered notebooks and crumpled papers, remnants of my thoughts and fears. Each page bore witness to my journey, a chronicle of pain and the simmering resolve to confront my family. I could still hear the echoes of laughter from the last family gathering, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had engulfed me. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my plans settling in my stomach like a stone. I wanted justice, a reckoning that would force my family to acknowledge the hurt they had caused me. But with that desire came a gnawing anxiety. What if my actions pushed them further away instead of drawing them closer? I envisioned the confrontation, a scenario where my mother's dismissive words would cut deeper than ever. Flipping through my notes, I focused on a line that resonated. I will not be reduced to a punchline. This was about reclaiming my identity, asserting my worth in a family that had long overlooked me. My fingers brushed over the pages, tracing the words as if to imbue them with power. I had to prepare not just for the confrontation, but for the aftermath. Would they refuse to acknowledge my feelings? The thought made my heart race, each beat echoing my determination. As I plotted my approach, I imagined discussing my feelings with Sophie. Her unwavering support had been a lifeline, and I needed her input on how to navigate this emotional minefield. We had been through so much together, and I could almost hear her voice encouraging me to stand my ground. I resolved to meet with her later that week, a strategic alliance in my quest for validation. The tension in my chest tightened, but I refused to let fear dictate my actions. I imagined the conversations we would have, the emotions that would bubble to the surface, and the potential for healing that lay beneath the surface of our fractured relationships. This was not just about revenge, it was about finally being seen and heard. I was ready to confront the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. My silence was never consent. This ends with me. I would not let my family's ignorance define my worth any longer. With renewed determination, I closed my notebook, the act itself a declaration of my intent. I was ready to face the repercussions, to demand justice for the years of emotional neglect. The stakes were high, yet the flames of resolve burned brightly within me, illuminating the path ahead. This time, I would not shy away from the confrontation. I would embrace it, knowing that the aftermath held the key to my liberation and understanding. The living room was a battleground, the air charged with unspoken words and fragile emotions. As I stood there, facing my mother for what felt like the 100th time, the scent of freshly baked cookies mingled with the tension that crackled between us. The soft golden light from the lamps cast shadows on the walls, highlighting the conflict that had long simmered beneath the surface. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing like a war drum, urging me to speak, to finally shatter the silence that had held me captive for too long. "You have to understand how your words affect me, Mom," I shouted, the volume of my voice surprising even me. My mother's eyes widened, shock morphing her features, but I pressed on, fueled by years of pent-up frustration. "Every time you dismiss me or overlook my achievements, I feel smaller, like I don't belong here at all." I could see the moment her expression shifted from disbelief to something softer, perhaps the faintest hint of realization. "I never meant to make you feel that way, Hannah," she replied, her voice wavering. It was a small concession, yet it felt monumental, a crack in the armor she wore so tightly. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my vulnerability hanging in the air, thick and tangible. It was now or never. I needed to seize this moment of clarity. "You have to see me for who I am, not just who you want me to be," I insisted, my voice trembling with the intensity of my emotions. I glanced around the room, noting the reactions of my siblings, their faces a mix of surprise and concern. My brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while my sister exchanged a quick glance with him, as if silently debating whether to intervene. This wasn't just about us anymore, it was about our entire family dynamic. The tension in the room shifted as my mother's defensive facade began to crack. "I just thought I was helping you, pushing you to be better," she murmured, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I could see the pain in her eyes, a reflection of the years she had spent navigating her own expectations and fears. Maybe she had never truly understood how her actions impacted me, how her relentless push for perfection felt like an insurmountable weight on my shoulders. "I need you to support me in being myself, not the version you wish I could be," I said, my heart racing as I spoke the words that had been trapped in my throat for so long. The silence that followed felt heavy, yet it was also liberating. I had finally voiced my truth, and for the first time, I could see a glimmer of understanding in her gaze. The air between us shifted, filled with the promise of a new beginning, a chance to rewrite our narrative. In that moment, I sensed a release, a lifting of the burdens we had both carried for too long. As my mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, I felt a rush of hope. We were finally breaking through the barriers that had separated us, inch by inch, word by word. The road ahead would still be fraught with challenges, but I knew we could navigate this together. This was just the beginning of a journey toward healing, and I was ready to embrace it. "This ends with me finding my voice, Mom," I whispered, determination flooding my words. I was ready to reclaim my identity, not just for myself, but for the family I loved. The warmth of the room wrapped around us, and I felt a flicker of hope igniting within, a promise that perhaps we could build something new from the ashes of our past. The air in the family home felt lighter, as if the weight of unspoken truths had finally begun to lift. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the dining table, where remnants of our earlier meal still lingered. I could hear the distant chirping of birds, a reminder that life continued outside, even as we navigated the aftermath of our confrontation. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and hope, the emotions swirling within me like a tempest ready to calm. As I glanced around the table, my family's expressions had shifted from tension to a tentative understanding. My mother, once so rigid, seemed softer, her brow furrowed in contemplation. "I never realized how deeply my actions affected you, Mia," she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. This was a moment I had longed for, yet it felt surreal, as if I were standing on the precipice of a new beginning. I searched her eyes, hoping to find sincerity in her words, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of warmth amidst the chill that had long defined our relationship. "I just want us to be honest with each other moving forward," I said, my voice steady despite the tremors of uncertainty that still danced in my chest. "Can we work on being a family that truly sees one another?" My siblings nodded, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and determination. The moment felt fragile yet powerful, as if we were all holding our breath, waiting to see if this new path could lead to healing. We spent the next hours sharing stories, laughter, and tears, unearthing years of buried feelings that had shaped our family dynamics. It was cathartic, and I could feel the bonds of connection slowly reweaving themselves, thread by thread. I remembered the times I had felt invisible, and now, as I shared my thoughts, I felt the warmth of acceptance wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. The kitchen, once a place of tension, transformed into a sanctuary of understanding. Later that evening, as I settled into my room, the chaos of the day began to settle. I took a deep breath, allowing the weight of unresolved tensions to dissipate. The scent of lavender from my diffuser filled the air, soothing my frayed nerves. I reflected on the journey we had just embarked upon, a journey filled with vulnerability and courage. We were not out of the woods yet, but for the first time, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. My family was beginning to acknowledge the pain we had caused one another, and together, we could navigate the healing process. As I closed my eyes, a sense of closure enveloped me. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to embrace it. With each passing day, I would continue to reclaim my voice and my place within this family, one honest conversation at a time. This was just the beginning, and I felt a newfound strength blossoming within me, a resolve to ensure that my story would no longer be one of silence, but of connection and love. In the weeks following our confrontation, a subtle shift began to unfold within our family. The air, once thick with unspoken tensions, now carried a tentative warmth, a cautious optimism that hinted at healing. As I settled into my new apartment, the walls adorned with photos capturing moments of joy, I reflected on how vulnerability had opened the door to deeper connections. My heart swelled with gratitude for the courage we had all summoned to face the uncomfortable truths that had long lingered in the shadows. Each family dinner since had turned into something of a ritual, a space where laughter mingled with honesty. My mother, no longer cloaked in defensiveness, began to share her own struggles, her fears of inadequacy as a parent, the weight of expectations that had burdened her for years. In return, I found myself opening up more, sharing my dreams and aspirations, no longer afraid to assert my identity. One evening, as we gathered around the table, my sister playfully recounted a story from our childhood, her